Hey guys, and welcome to Petrol Ped, and welcome to the Porsche 911 992 GT3 in shark blue. Now, a car as special as the one behind me deserves a bit of extra effort in terms of video production. So for this video, I'm working with the guys from Insta360 who've sent me one of these, their 1x2 360-degree video camera, a really very clever bit of kit. It produces video in 3, 4 or 5.7K, brilliant image stabilization, and is waterproof to 10 meters. And I'm going to be using it in this video, so keep an eye out for the clips that have been made with this. It's got a brilliant mode called invisible selfie stick mode, which we shall be trying out. And then once you've made all your videos, you basically link your phone via an app and Wi-Fi to the device, and you can edit the footage on the device. Now, I'm going to put a link in the description below and a pinned comment. If you're super quick and you click on the link before the 18th of January and buy one of these, you'll get a free selfie stick. But also stay tuned until the end of the video, because I'm going to give you for the first time a behind the scenes as to how I used this in the video and how I made the really cool shots that I'm going to get with the car behind me. But I reckon before we do any of that, I'm going to go and make myself a cup of tea. Yeah, it's a pretty chilly day, so a cup of tea while I chat to you, and luckily Porsche have provided me with a nice coffee table to put my cup of tea on. Don't worry, I have my favourite Top Gun coaster to protect the car. Now, I'm sure like many of you, when this car broke cover last year, I gorged myself on as many videos as I could of people like Chris Harris and Henry Catchpole sliding it sideways around a motor circuit. And when I knew I was going to get access to the car, I thought, well, how am I going to approach the video? I don't have access to a motor circuit, and I don't have the talent to be sliding it around a motor circuit either. So I'm on the public highway. There is an argument to say this car has too much performance to really demonstrate that on the public highway. So I thought I would approach it. I'm just a normal guy. I'm a reasonable driver, but nothing special. And some of you will maybe never even get the chance to sit in a car like this, let alone drive it. So I wanted to kind of immerse you in that experience, whilst at the same time talking about what makes this car so very special. And I thought I would start on the outside with the main talking point when the car launched, this massive wing. Especially if you compare it to GT3s of old, this is more kind of GT3 RS in size, but it's this swan neck design that was the real talking point, because it is quite out there. However, it's very motorsport oriented, and if you know anything about aerodynamics, and I think we all learned something when this wing came out, much of the downforce from a wing like this is actually created on the underside, and what this swan neck allows is for an undisturbed underside of the wing, which gives better aero performance. It looks a little bit different from what's normal, and I think there are many of you that might think it's the coolest thing ever, and some not so. And I guess the first question is, would I take this or the GT3 Touring, which doesn't have the wing? I'd have the wing every day. I think this car looks absolutely epic, especially from the rear three-quarter. I also love the way it sits on its wheels. It's got split wheels, so 20-inch wheels at the front, 21 at the back, and the rear tyres have a 315 section. They are gigantic. Now, the tricky thing for me for this review is this car sat on Michelin Pilot Sport Cup 2 tyres, which isn't the best because at the moment the temperature's not that much above freezing. It's kind of, very low single figures, so it is a little bit sketchy on these tyres. Another thing just to talk about the lovely paint, this shark blue is an optional colour. It's I think about a £2,500 option. So yeah, it's a really interesting one. So let's have a jump on the inside of the car. There's plenty to talk about on the inside. We'll also talk more about this amazing 4-litre flat 6 that's kind of underneath me there. You can't actually get to see the engine at all. There's a little cover there for you to kind of top up your fluids, but you can't get to the engine at all. It produces 510 horsepower. This car weighs just over 1,400 kilos. This is the manual, so it's a little bit lighter than the PDK, but we'll talk more about that once we get going. So once I finish my cup of tea, because I know many of you will freak out if I took a cup of tea on the inside of the car, we'll jump on the inside, talk about what some of the options fitted to this car are, and then I want to spend most of this review driving the car, because that's what this car's all about, right? So I'm going to finish my cup of tea and then we'll jump inside the car. Oh, now, there is a bit of a technique to get in and out of this with these carbon bucket seats, because they have very high side bolsters. I've been putting my left hand on this side of the seat, my right hand on the sill, and just easing myself in. So ingress and egress is a little bit tricky. However, once you're sat in this car, you can get in such an incredible driving position. The steering wheel, you can get, I like the steering wheel really close to me, and you just sit here and you're not going anywhere. These are super comfortable, these seats. I've driven a few Porsches with them now. They look like they would be uncomfortable. They don't have any adjustments, so I guess if you've got back problems, you can't change the attitude of the back of the seat. There's no lumbar support and so on. So if you were wanting one of these as a more of a daily car, you might well spec the more traditional seats and not go for these. Personally, for me, I think they look amazing and I would definitely spec them. I know they're a reasonably expensive extra. This car doesn't have the Club Sport pack, so the roll cage in the back. And whilst I think the roll cage looks really cool, I think for usability, it's probably better to not have it, because you've got a huge amount of storage in the back. It's got a rear seat delete, but you've got loads of room for bags. Maybe even the dogs could go in the back there. It's a super practical space. And if you've got the cage, you kind of lose an awful lot of that. You can get things in between the cage, but it just makes it far, far more difficult. But for me personally, I wouldn't spec the cage either. So far, this car's pretty much the exact spec I would go for. I got a choice of getting the PDK or the manual. I wanted to drive the manual. We'll talk more about that when we're out on the road. But also the other option this car has, which I think is a super important one, is it's got a nose lift on. It's very low at the front of this car, and I think that just helps you with things like sleeping policemen and entrances into car parks and things. If we just quickly fire the car up, there's a couple of things I want to talk about. Apart from the fact it sounds absolutely awesome. It's got wireless Apple CarPlay. There is a little thing in here to put your phone and keys and so on. So that's really cool. In terms of drive mode, you've got normal, sport and track. If you're in sport or track mode, you've got an option to reduce the number of screens. So in the 992, you've got these 5 screens, and I mentioned in my Carrera S video of 18 months ago, you can't actually see the outside 2 screens, which is really, really annoying. So actually in track mode, you just get a really focused view. And that's pretty much as I want to talk about on the inside anyway. I think the next thing we need to do is take this car up the road, and I'll talk much, much more about the various things that I think are important about this car when it's being driven. Now then, the very first time you get in this car, even when you're manoeuvring around a car park like I did when I picked it up from Porsche yesterday, you know that the steering is going to be something very special, because it does that horrible skippy thing at the front, the Ackerman effect. I'll forgive it this time, because what that means is you have the most incredible front end. Now, this car is the first Porsche car to have wishbone suspension up front. That's been well documented. And you think, well, will that really make a difference to a normal Joe Bloggs driver like me? The simple answer to that is yes. The front end of this car is just absolutely pinpoint accurate. Oh, back's a bit slippy as well. Let me demonstrate. All I need to do is that. It is so sharp. Now, what that means is, coupled with the rear wheel steering, is you have a beautifully precise tool in your hands when you wrap them around this lovely Alcantara clad steering wheel. And the feedback you get from the road, well, it's almost like you need to learn a new language, learn the new language of Porsche. And once you're fluent in that language, the conversations you can have with this car about the road surface, well, they're deep and complex. It feeds back absolutely everything. However, for me, that's really designed around a race circuit where the tarmac's really smooth. As soon as you get onto a more bumpy B road, those little bits of feedback, that conversation you start to have becomes really very complex and quite urgent. And all that means is it's a car you really have to concentrate on. It feels nervous and jittery. It's not, it's just being very, very accurate. And I have to say, coming from my Mini, which is pretty sketchy at the front as well, it feels at home. But I can imagine a few people won't like it, but boy, does this car talk to you. Now, as I'm sure you're all aware, this GT3 is available with a choice of gearboxes, unusually. You can have the PDK, flappy paddle, or you can have a 6-speed manual. And when I was offered this car to review, it was manual for me straight away. I love the involvement of the mechanics of swapping cogs yourself. And I have to say, the gearbox in this car is just a work of art. It is beautiful. The gear change is really nice and notchy and slick. The clutch weight's really nice. The auto blip function, I've got it switched on because, as I've remarked in Porsche reviews before, Porsche auto blipping can do it an awful lot better than I can heel and toe, but the pedal spacing on this car is perfect for heel and towing. So if you want to do that yourself, knock yourself out. And I have to say, on the public road, like I'm driving today, a manual gearbox, for me, just gives a more deep integration of you and the car. It really does involve you a lot more. Having said that, a PDK, and I've driven lots of Porsches with PDK, it's a brilliant gearbox. I can imagine if you're going to be doing a lot of track driving, then PDK will be the option for you, because it changes gear so quickly, both up and down. If you're wanting to swap cogs fast, PDK is probably the option for you. I think if I was buying one of these, I'd choose manual for a number of reasons. Number one, because I don't think really the likes of this car offered with a manual gearbox are going to be that common anymore. They're not common now. And I prefer driving a manual box. But it is a close call, a really, really close call. But listen to this. Come on. And then when you come out, you can just hold the gear and then punch it. It's to the 9,000 RPM red line. Awesome. So behind me is engine perfection. A 4-litre flat 6 naturally aspirated engine producing 510 horsepower. Only 500 horsepower, but it's plenty, believe me. It's a smidge up on the previous Gen GT3, but it's not about the numbers, this car. I mean, it's going to dispatch 60 miles an hour in under 3.5 seconds. The manual's a little bit slower, PDK for obvious reasons, quicker changes and so on. If you want outright acceleration, then you're going to go for the PDK box. But the engine is a masterpiece, and the best bit about it, let me just get a clear bit of road. Luckily the road's quite dry today, but is 9,000 RPM redline. I haven't had that since I had my Honda S2000. It sings, this car, and the performance it delivers on the public highway is absolutely ample. But just look at the way it's eating these corners. It's just absolutely sensational, this car. It really, really is. So the performance is mind-blowing. On a public road, arguably it's too much. You can't tap into this car on a public highway with speed limits. I couldn't imagine what this car's like on a motor circuit. It's just a masterpiece, an absolute masterpiece. But you just find yourself dropping it down into lower gears. You have to be in a lower gear, because if you want to pull all the way to 9,000 RPM, you have to be in a lower gear, otherwise you're going to be breaking the speed limit by a lot. But it just revs all day long, this car, absolutely all day long. I love the track display on the dash. We narrow it down to just 3 dials, but there's some shift up lights either side of the rev counter, and that just, when you're really concentrating, I imagine on track it's an absolute must. You know exactly when to take the next gear, and when you do that and you get the change right, it's something else, this car. Better way to have a conversation about the ride quality and comfort of this car than to immerse you into what it's like being in this car by going 360, and also by going up my favourite bit of road, the Petrol Ped hill climb. Now, this car is a very firmly sprung car. It's a car designed for a racetrack. This conversation's a little bit like the conversation we've just had about the steering being so sharp and so focused. And it's the same thing about the ride quality. It's a very firmly sprung car, and I think it could be too harsh for some. For me, well, look, it's designed to be quick around a circuit, and the compromise you have for that is it's going to be firm on a road, and unfortunately the roads in the UK aren't the best. This hasn't been long resurfaced, and it's pretty good coming up here. So it is quite harsh. There's quite a lot of road noise. Those massive rear tyres do make a lot of noise, so it's quite a noisy cabin, and I think there's probably quite a lot of lightening of the car being done by removing soundproofing and those types of things, and there's thin glass, and you know, it's a noisy car. But the ride quality is harsh but not unbearable. So as we come to the end of the day, what are my final driving impressions of this 992 GT3? Well, I think it's one of the best cars I've ever driven, and I don't say that lightly because I've driven some incredible cars, but the feel that this car gives you, just listen to that, the driving engagement, the front end sharpness is just on another level. It really is. And when you come out of a corner and you get to bury the throttle, you have to respect it. You have to respect it, because that was with all the systems on. I am on Cup 2s. They're quite warm, but they still need a bit more warmth by the sounds of it. Yeah, it's an amazing car, this. I can understand some of the criticism levelled at this car. The ride is very firm. So if you don't like a firm ride car, it's not for you, and there's not a comfort setting in the suspension either. You've got sport or track. If you are not too keen on really engaging, very sharp, very feedbackful steering, this car's not for you either, although why you wouldn't want that in a car, I've got no idea. In terms of the spec for me, pretty much this car, to be honest. I love the shark blue colour, although that is a $2.5 grand option. I definitely have the wing. I definitely wouldn't have the roll cage, because I just think the level of openness there and the practicality this gives you, if you did want to tour with this car, drive it to the Nürburgring, take it to the south of France, then you can get stuff in the back. With the cage, it makes it incredibly difficult. I definitely have these seats, and for me, I definitely have the manual gearbox. It's the star of the show for me. It just makes this car, it's a bit like when I drove the Aston Martin Vantage GT8, the manual box in that just put you at one with the car. And I know I'd be quick around a track with a PDK. I know it would probably be easier to live with a PDK, but I don't care. I really don't care, because for me, this car is all about the engagement, the involving drive that it offers you. And it's like very few cars I've ever driven, and hurrah to Porsche. The only challenge Porsche has now is what on earth are they going to do with the GT3 RS? I've only driven one of those once at 997 on track, and it was just an amazing thing. So how they're going to make this even better into an RS, I've got no idea, but I'll leave that problem to the clever people at Porsche. But for now, I hope you enjoyed that one. If you have done so, please give me a thumbs up. Comments below are always welcome. And if you haven't done so already, please subscribe to Petrol Ped for plenty more content to come. I've really enjoyed this one. I put a lot of time and effort into this one. Just gave me an excuse to drive the car a lot, really. Anyway, guys, I'll see you on the next film. You take care. Drive safe. Now then, I hope you enjoyed that video, but the big question is, how on earth did I get all of those cool shots using the 360-degree camera? Well, at the moment, I'm using the invisible selfie stick. Basically, the camera just removes the bit that has the stick on it. It's really clever, but the question is, how did I get that cool drone shot that looked like you were following the car? Well, it's really easy. At the bottom of the selfie stick is a screw mount that goes onto a standard suction cup, and then you can stick the suction cup onto the back of the wing. A couple of things to bear in mind. You want to make sure that the wing is nice and clean, or wherever you're sticking this to the car, but also, I mean, the actual selfie stick itself can go quite high. You don't need it to be that high. I had it about this high, and then I just made sure that everything was tightened off really nicely. Now, the really cool thing about these 360 cameras, you don't have to kind of angle them like you would do a traditional camera. As long as it's roughly at the back, you are good to go. You then start the camera rolling with your app, drive off down the road, and then you can do your post-production in the app itself by just playing back and moving the phone, and that will move the orientation of the camera. Really, really cool. But how about the internal shots? So how did I get the shots in the car? Well, clearly I didn't use a selfie stick, so you just unscrew that, and then you can use your suction cup mount. Now, if you want to have improved audio, the mic on these is really good, but I use a wireless lav mic in noisy cars like this one, so you can use something like a wireless go, and you can get a little adapter that actually screws in between the mount and the camera. And the really nice thing is the camera then makes that go invisible, which is really, really clever. So if I just screw that on, so that's then screwed in place, and then you've got a little adapter to connect the audio. And then once that's like that, I basically stick that on the windscreen at the front. You don't have to worry about aligning the cameras. You know, sometimes with the traditional camera, you're there trying to get the best shot. You just do all of that in post-production. And then set the camera rolling. And then once you've finished, you go into the app on your phone, and you can basically, using that, you can move the phone around, and that moves the field of view around the 360 degrees, and you almost kind of capture what that's going to look like. You save that as a file, you export that to your camera roll, and then I use a Mac, so I then just airdrop that to my Mac and then stick it in Final Cut and edit it as a piece of video in the final video. And that's it. Super simple. So yeah, as I said, there's a link in the description below. Follow that and you can go and get one of these. If you buy one of these before the 18th of Jan, you'll get a free selfie stick, but they're brilliant, and you could use them for all kinds of things. Biking, both motorbikes and push bikes. You could use it for skiing, you could use it for snorkeling. I'm probably going to take this to the Maldives and get some really cool 360 degree video when I'm snorkeling. Very cool bit of kit, but thanks to Insta360 for helping support this video. Anyway guys, hope you enjoyed that one.